What if the villain was the one who actually understood God best? Thanos was the good guy. Let me explain. You grew up on superhero movies. The good guy always won and evil was punished. You were taught that if you did the right thing, you'll be protected, loved, and rewarded. But then you got older and you entered into the real world, and reality didn't match that script. And now you see it. Bad people rise, good souls get crushed, and the ones with the power make all the rules. You felt that pain before, haven't you? As a conscious soul, this feels like betrayal. You came here to love, to serve, and to uplift others, but somewhere along the lines, you mistook being open-hearted with being too agreeable. You pour your essence out and get met with silence, judgment, or worse, indifference. And so you stop showing up fully and you shut down, left with a bitter taste in your mouth around the idea of following your heart. And still, you watch others, people with less love, less care, and less integrity, get all the spoils of victory. You've been too nice, too patient, too understanding, and it's left you cold and abandoned, like a paper bag in the wind, drifting without direction, never really being noticed. You don't live in the reflection of the divine truth you know is inside of you, just a quiet ache in your chest and a whisper that says, maybe they were right. Maybe the villains know something that I don't. I mean, Thanos was trying to save the planet, not out of hatred, but with a purpose. He saw what others refused to see. He was willing to make the hard choices no one else would. So the question here is, how do you stay heart-centered in a reality that rewards domination? How do you embody love without being slaughtered? The answer is, you need two gears. You already have the first, your love and your light, but now you need the second gear, your villain mode. The unreasonable part of you that says, enough, I will never abandon myself ever again. A frequency that ruthlessly cuts away distractions, betrayal, false peace, and anything else that does not serve you at the highest levels. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 4 sacred phases of the healthy villain arc, the path that will make you what I call unfuckwithable, while keeping your heart pure and intact. And there's a reason I say healthy villain arc, which I'll get to later on, but for right now, let's start with phase 1, acceptance. To be good, you must be bad. Or at least you must first accept the parts of you that have been labeled as bad. Not to justify it, not to live from them, but to understand them. Because until you understand this reality, you'll keep playing the game backwards, wondering why things aren't working for you, while others with half your integrity get all the spoils. Let me explain this. You were taught to be a good boy, a good girl, be kind, be quiet, play by the rules, and the universe will reward you. But that's not actually how this game works. At the highest levels of spiritual consciousness, there is no good or evil. There is only vibration, alignment, and cause and effect. And I can prove this to you. If you fall off a building, no matter how good you think you are, gravity still applies. God will not save you just because you think you're good. And it's not because God is cruel, it's because this reality runs on law, not emotion or morality. We live in a universe of precision, a universe that reflects, not rescues. It doesn't bend because you're innocent or well-intentioned. It bends when you understand how it works. And here's the hard pill to swallow. The universe does not reward goodness. It rewards clarity, embodiment, and power. So when you feel like life keeps passing you by, even though your heart is pure and your intentions are noble, that's not because something is wrong with you. It's because you're still waiting for the rewards of a system that doesn't operate on merit. It runs on mastery. And the first step towards mastery is accepting the truth. There is no devil. There is no hell. There is only the remembrance or forgetfulness of who you really are. There are no evil people, only forgetful souls. Souls lost in pain, lost in the illusion of reality, repeating the same cycles of unconsciousness. Even the most vicious criminals, at their core, are just fractured expressions of the same divine light that you hold. That doesn't excuse them or take away the consequences that they deserve, but it does remind you, nothing that exists is outside the domain of God. We all come from the same source. The difference is whether you remember or not. Think about this. Genghis Khan led the bloodiest conquest in human history. Millions of lives lost, entire civilizations wiped out, and yet today, he's studied, admired, and celebrated. His name lives on not as a demon, but as a leader. Same with Alexander the Great. He invaded, dominated, and destroyed, and became a legend because of it. So were they evil, or were they just powerful? Or simply playing their role in the karmic evolution of our species? From the lens of divine truth, there is no good or bad. There are only souls, some remembering and some forgetting, all playing their part in the collective awakening of consciousness. And that is why guilt is a lie, why shame is a poison, why you must accept your shadows instead of hiding from them. Because here's the difference between you and the real villains of the world. They have no guilt, they have no shame, and they do not hesitate in taking what they want. And because of that, they keep winning. They have no consequences, no karma for their actions, because karma doesn't respond to guilt, karma responds to vibration. And when your vibration is guilt-ridden and apologetic for simply existing, the universe will keep you in a stranglehold that blurs your vision and knocks you off balance. You lose not because you're unworthy, but because you're unconvinced of your own worth. I see so many conscious beings gripped by the fear of being seen. They're brilliant souls that have something to say, something powerful to offer the world, but they're terrified of being judged. They whisper their truth because they're afraid someone will say, "Well, who do you think you are?" I actually made a video talking extensively about the fear of being seen and being worried about other people's opinions. If you want to go deeper into that, tap the link here somewhere on the screen and you can watch it later. But let me tell you something. The people who fulfill their highest calling in this life are not the ones who waited for permission. They were the ones who chose themselves. They remembered their divine nature and spoke it into existence. You are not God with a capital G, but you are of God. A conscious fragment of the infinite, a living portal for creation itself. And the moment you accept this, not intellectually, but energetically, that's the moment the universe begins to respond to you in a completely different way. You've been waiting to be validated, to be accepted. But the secret is, you were always chosen. The only question that remains is, will you choose yourself? And yes, the world might reject you. They rejected every prophet, every revolutionary, every soul who came to embody something greater than the status quo. They were rejected, but that's the assignment. That's the part that the villains of this world get that you haven't fully stepped into. To be the chosen one is to be misunderstood, to be doubted, to be laughed at, because that's the price that every master must pay just before stepping into their highest power. To release the guilt, to let go of the shame, to stop caring so much and stop over-explaining yourself, to stop apologizing for the bigness of your spirit. You don't need to prove your worth, you need to remember it. And when you do, you create space in your energetic field for reality to reorganize itself around your genius. Now I want you to pause for a second. Really take a look at your life. Not from emotion, but from clarity. Where have you been betraying yourself to be accepted? How often have you kept quiet, played small, and watered yourself down just to be liked, approved of, and not seen as too much? And what has that cost you? What opportunities have passed you by because you were still waiting for the world to reward you for being nice? This isn't about shame, it's about awareness. Because until you see it clearly, you'll keep calling it compassion when really it's self-abandonment. Your freedom begins with this truth. And this is your first act of sovereignty, to see yourself clearly and to decide to never abandon your power ever again. This is where your redemption begins in phase 2. Once you've accepted the nature of this reality, that sometimes the bad guys win and that being soft and nice often gets you walked all over, you enter your redemption arc. This is where your villain gear activates. But here's the paradox. In order to be truly selfless, you have to be selfish first. Not petty, not reckless, but rooted in rational self-interest, in honoring your own existence before offering anything else to the world. There's a book I highly recommend to everyone at this stage, The Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. Controversial name, sure, but the principles in it are pure gold. She argues that living for your own sake, refusing to sacrifice yourself to please others, and pursuing your own happiness with integrity is the foundation of a moral life. And this is especially crucial for conscious beings like you, because being nice doesn't make you good. If you're constantly betraying yourself to accommodate others, that's not spiritual, that's self-abandonment. You give and give and give, and then you become resentful when your generosity isn't reciprocated. You collapse under the weight of your own kindness, and eventually, you lose yourself completely and have nothing left to give. This is where the villain begins to rise. You must become dangerous, not abusive or tyrannical, but capable of destruction, of saying no, of cutting ties, of drawing lines in the sand and enforcing them with unwavering clarity. Because if you're not dangerous, then your compassion means nothing. You're not loving, you're just harmless. Carl Jung said it best in his teachings on shadow work. A man is not virtuous because he cannot harm. He is virtuous because he has the capacity to ravish the earth and chooses to build gardens instead. That is the difference between being nice and being powerful. A man or a woman who subdues their demons integrates their shadow, and still stands with a soft heart in the face of chaos, that's a master. That's a leader. That's someone you don't fuck with. And you also feel safe around them. That's the true redemption arc. You enter the battlefield of life and become unfuckwithable. If you've ever played a video game or watched a hero movie, you know this arc. It's that moment when the main character has been completely crushed. They're left bleeding, betrayed, and broken. They've lost the people they love. They're doubting everything, clouded in a sea of uncertainty, unsure of how to find a way to win. But then, something clicks. They don't wait to be rescued. They get up, scarred and limping, and they enter the battlefield anyways. Their back's against the wall, which forces their genius to come out. They stop hoping life will be fair, and they start fighting for what they know is theirs. Not out of rage, but out of necessity. Because if they don't reclaim their power now, no one else will. That's your villain arc. That's what rising looks like. It's not pretty or perfect. It's messy and uncomfortable. You become so selfish, so discerning with your energy, time, and focus that anything not aligned with your mission must die. Starve your distractions and leave no space in your reality for anything that does not absolutely support you on your path in life. Because the world is not full of villains, it's full of forgetful souls who will take everything from you if you let them. If you can't face the dragon, the taker, the manipulator, the parasite, and say, not here, not ever, then you'll be consumed. Not because you're not spiritual, but because you refuse to honor your own divinity. You know, I've spent a lot of time in different spiritual communities, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard the same thing from the women there. They tell me that your masculine energy makes me feel safe. They tell me that it's rare, that it's refreshing to not have to think when they're around me, and that it gives them hope that there are other men out there that are like this. Because so many spiritual men are nice, but they're spineless. They confuse passivity with virtue. They bend to the will of others in the name of love, and in doing so become the most dangerous kind of man there is. Because weak love is manipulation. It guilt trips, it fawns, it hides behind spirituality to avoid responsibility. But the true masculine, it doesn't flinch. And whether you're a woman or a man, your redemption arc is about reclaiming the parts of you that were psyoped out by a society that taught you to be agreeable, soft, passive, and digestible. You're not here to be liked, you're here to be unshakable. You are not for everyone. You're here to pull back the reins of your power, to choose yourself again and again without shame, without apology. So how do you actually apply this in your life? Here's a reflection for you. What are the things you know you need to be doing right now? The things that would pull you into the next level of your life? What people, environments, or habits are getting in the way of that, even if they appear positive on the surface? It's time to make the cut. This isn't about being heartless. This is about being clear. Step into your selfish era. Get in the arena. Start taking action, ruthlessly, unapologetically, and eliminate anything that isn't aligned with where you're headed. This is the only way through. The world isn't waiting for your perfection, it's waiting for your power. Because only once you have that foundation, only once you've gathered the strength, the boundaries, the resources, and the clarity to stand tall can you move into phase 3, Transcendence. Now, remember what I said earlier, this is a healthy villain arc. You don't stay a villain forever. Your life is not a 2-hour movie, and you're not Thanos. You're not here to destroy everything in your path. You're here to become whole. To stop being just the nice guy or girl, or the spiritual healer, or the quiet observer. You're here to become a complete human being. That's why villain mode, it's not a destination, it's a phase of reclamation. A sacred training ground for practicing discernment. It's where you activate the parts of you you've spent your life suppressing. Power, fire, self-prioritization, ruthless clarity. But the point was never to live from them. The point was to remember that you can go there when necessary. Because the truth is, most conscious souls don't need to be less nice. They need to be 20% more dangerous and disagreeable. The problem is, you don't know what that feels like. To you, being 20% more disagreeable feels like you're being an insufferable tyrant. But in reality, it's just healthy boundaries and self-respect. I'll explain this with an example that I use from some of the vocal projection work that I've done with some of my clients. If I have a client that has a problem speaking up, I'll run them through a simple vocal projection exercise. I'll have someone stand up and project their voice across the room, and every single time, the ones who struggle to speak up in life, the ones who've been taught not to take up space, they think that they're being loud. They'll say, yeah, I really let it rip that time. And then when I ask everybody else in the room how they felt about it, everyone agrees it was weak and we can barely hear them. So we'll run it back again. We adjust their posture, we drop them into their gut. We unlock the voice they've never given themselves permission to use. And then the room shakes. For the first time, they've felt the sound of their own power. It's not aggressive, it's not angry, It's clear, resonant, and unapologetic. That's what transcendence looks like with having powerful speech, and it's a perfect juxtaposition with being more dangerous and disagreeable. It's when you stop apologizing for needing to set a boundary. It's when you stop over-explaining yourself to keep everyone else comfortable. It's when you stop bending to other people's energy just to keep the peace. Because now you've trained. You've bled in private. You've faced your shadow, your resentment, and your edges. And now you know how to turn your fire into fuel. And once you embody that, you no longer really need to be in villain mode. You've internalized the strength, and now you can return to your true nature. To love, to serve, to walk with compassion, but with a sword in one hand and a shield in the other. You've become someone who's not necessarily here to dominate others, but also someone who cannot be dominated. This is the birth of a genuine master of reality, the mark of a true leader, of a conscious soul who's finally safe to be powerful because they know who they are. But let me make this clear. Transcendence doesn't mean bypassing integrity. Villain mode doesn't give you a license to become a psychopathic narcissist. You still only engage in mutually beneficial relationships. You still operate from truth and discernment, and you still care deeply. This isn't permission to scam people, to manipulate others, or weaponize your power. I've seen people go full villain mode and never come back, and they destroy their reputations, their relationships, and they sabotage any kind of trust they've built with the universe. Do not be that person. The real master knows when to strike and when to stay silent, when to walk away and when to lean in, when to hold the line and when to open the heart, because they're not operating from wounded rebellion anymore. They're operating from wholeness. So take a deep breath right now. You've remembered your fire. You've reclaimed your edges. But now, I want you to visualize the version of you who has transcended it all. The you who no longer needs to bark, prove, or posture because your energy speaks before you do. The version of you who walks into any room with clarity, calm, and quiet command. Ask yourself this. If you were the version of yourself, fully integrated and rooted in power, how would it feel? How would you carry yourself tomorrow morning? What would your presence alone communicate to the world? Hold that vision for a moment, because that's where we're headed next. Phase 4 is where it all lands, where power becomes peace, where energy begins to walk into rooms before you do. Welcome to Embodiment, Phase 4. After all that fire and all that fight, there comes a moment where something inside of you finally settles. A quiet strength rises, not because you've conquered the world, but because you stopped trying to prove anything to it. This is what true embodiment feels like. You walk differently now, not with arrogance, not with force, but with the calm, grounded presence of someone who has come home to themselves. There is a peace in your chest and a power in your spine, and it radiates without you needing to say a word. Boundaries become effortless. You don't have to defend your space because people can feel the strength of it. They recognize the presence of someone who will not be moved, and who no longer needs to shout to be heard. This is what it means to wear the armor of God, not as something you put on, but as something you become. A field of protection that cannot be penetrated because it is rooted in truth. And from that truth, something even greater emerges. Forgiveness. Not the kind that lets people walk all over you, but the kind that rises from deep understanding. Because you too have been lost. You too have forgotten who you were. You've hurt others and said things in fear and from pain. So now, when you see someone perpetuating harm, you no longer respond with retaliation. You see yourself in them. You remember what it was like to live in survival. And because you no longer live there, you don't need to make them pay. You trust the intelligence of the universe to balance what needs balancing. And with a full heart and a calm mind, you choose to be the bigger soul. You look them in the eyes and say, no, you first. I can wait. Not out of superiority, but out of love. Because the most forgetful souls need salvation more than you do. The true villain arc was never about power over others. It was about integration. It was about dancing with the shadow so you could carry more light. It was about being able to protect those who cannot protect themselves. You studied the villain not to be cruel, but to understand fearlessness. Not to mirror their harm, but to embody their unapologetic commitment to self. And now you bring that energy home to the heart. You alchemize it into something holy. You fan the flame of your divinity. You are no longer ruled by the need to win, because you understand now that peace is the win. And perhaps the greatest truth of all is this. You cannot hold light with clenched fists. To carry resentment in your heart is to stay bonded to the very pain you came here to release. You let it go, not because it didn't matter, but because your soul has more important work to do. And so I leave you with one simple question. Do you have the courage to forgive? Because the world needs more healing now than ever, and nothing compares to the healing wisdom of a healthy villain.